Please? Just do it fast, the billionaire whispered. The single dad shared his jacket and melted her walls. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. The night had dropped to the low 30s, the kind of cold that chewed straight through denim and old boots. In the dim, echoing levels of a downtown parking garage, Ethan Cole hurried across the concrete with a paper bag of dollar-menu dinners for him and his little girl. He tugged his jacket tighter. It was the only real coat he owned, lined with fleece worn thin from too many winters. His breath clouded in front of him as he reached his beat-up Ford, but he froze when he heard something. A soft, shaky whisper drifted from behind a concrete pillar. Please, just do it fast. The words were so fragile they almost didn't make it across the cold air. Ethan turned sharply. For a moment he thought it was someone in danger, someone being threatened, because that voice carried the same trembling edge he'd heard years ago in the ER when his late wife begged the doctor to just take the pain away. His pulse kicked. He stepped closer. That was when he saw her. A woman in a pale grey blazer, heels scuffed from rushing, hair damp like she had walked through freezing rain. She stood half-curled against the pillar, one hand gripping the sleeve of her blazer, the other trembling near her collarbone. And she looked terrified. "Are you hurt?" Ethan asked, hands raised slightly so he wouldn't scare her. She didn't answer at first. She just shivered uncontrollably, her breathing sharp, rapid. Then he noticed it, her blazer sleeve was twisted unnaturally, caught in the metal hinge of a parking gate arm that must have slammed down unexpectedly. Her arm was trapped at an awkward angle, circulation slowing, the cold making every small movement agony. No wonder she whispered those words. Please, just do it fast. She wasn't begging for escape. She was bracing for pain. Ethan moved closer. I'm going to help you. You're not alone, okay? She still didn't look at him, but her jaw clenched as if she expected the worst. Ethan crouched, inspecting the hinge. It was jam tight. He would have to pull her arm free, and it would hurt. All right, he murmured, voice soft as he braced his hands around the gate. I'm going to lift on 3. 1. 2. He didn't wait for 3. He knew anticipation was sometimes worse than the pain itself. With a grunt he shoved upward. The metal creaked. She gasped sharply as her arm slipped free, and she staggered forward, nearly falling. Ethan reached out instinctively, catching her by the shoulders. She was ice cold, colder than the air around them, like she had been standing there far too long. She whispered, "Thank you," or barely audible, like the words were slipping from lips that had forgotten how to form them. Without thinking, Ethan shrugged off his jacket, the only warm thing he owned, and draped it over her shoulders. She startled, trying to protest, but he shook his head once. "You're freezing. Keep it on." "I'm good." It wasn't true. The cold immediately punched into his arms and chest, making him shiver. But she needed warmth more than he did. She clutched the jacket with trembling fingers. For the first time, she lifted her face. And Ethan stopped. Not because she was beautiful, though she was, but because she looked exhausted. Hollow. Like someone who'd carried a mountain all day and finally collapsed under the weight. Something flickered behind her eyes, a guarded panic that felt out of place for someone dressed like she belonged in a boardroom. "I didn't expect anyone to," she whispered. She didn't finish the sentence. The garage lights flickered above them, buzzing softly. A distant car alarm chirped. But all Ethan could focus on was how small she looked inside his oversized jacket, and how tightly she held onto it as if it was the first warm thing she had felt in hours. "What's your name?" Ethan asked gently. She hesitated, swallowing hard. Aurora. The name rolled off her tongue like it carried history. Like it belonged to someone important. But right now, she wasn't a billionaire, wasn't a title, wasn't a symbol. She was just a woman who had whispered for the pain to be quick. Ethan nodded. I'm Ethan. And you're safe now, Aurora. She closed her eyes briefly, letting his words settle. For one fragile second, her walls cracked, the faintest glimpse of a woman who had built entire empires but never learned how to ask for help. And that was the moment, right there in the cold, fluorescent glow of a parking garage, when her life quietly slipped into his. She didn't know it yet. Neither did he. But that single jacket and that single act of kindness had just shifted the course of both their worlds. The cold from the parking garage clung to Ethan long after he walked away from Aurora that night. By the time he reached his old Ford, his arms were stiff from the wind, but he could not bring himself to regret giving her his only warm jacket. He drove home with the paper bag of dollar menu dinners cooling on the passenger seat, the heater wheezing out air that was barely warm. As he pulled into the worn-out apartment complex, he saw the bedroom light of his unit flicker. His 6-year-old daughter, Lily, peeked out the window with messy hair and her favorite stuffed bear in her arm. When he stepped inside, she ran straight to him. "Daddy, you forgot your jacket again." He gave a small laugh and lifted her into his arms. "I did not forget it. I just loaned it to someone who needed it." Lily studied him with those big, serious eyes that seemed far too wise for her age. "Was she cold?" "Freezing," Ethan said, gently brushing her hair back. "Then you did the right thing," she whispered, the way children always somehow know what matters most. Later, after Lily finally drifted to sleep, Ethan sat on the edge of his bed, rubbing the chill from his hands. The image of Aurora whispering "please, just do it fast," would not leave him. Something about her had not felt ordinary. There was a gravity to her presence, even in fear. A kind of quiet elegance that did not match the setting or her panic. He wondered if she had made it home safely. But she had his jacket. She would be warm. The next morning, before the sun fully rose, Ethan walked Lily to the neighbor's apartment where Mrs. Jenkins would watch her while he went to work. His day started at the construction site on the west side of the city, the kind of job where hands blister fast and boots wear down even faster. Sawdust clung to the air, and heavy machinery echoed across the lot. Ethan kept working through the cold, even though every gust of wind reminded him he no longer had his jacket. Around noon, as he carried a stack of lumber to the back of the site, a black sedan rolled slowly onto the gravel. No one who worked here drove something that expensive. The tinted window slid down. A man in a tailored black suit leaned slightly toward the opening. "Excuse me," he said. "Are you Ethan Cole?" Ethan frowned, tightening his grip on the lumber. "Yes, can I help you?" The man stepped out, polished shoes already collecting dust. "Miss Aurora would like to speak with you." Ethan felt his heartbeat trip. Miss Aurora. So she was fine. She had found him. But the sedan, the suit, the formal tone of the man, it did not match the trembling woman he had helped in the parking garage. He followed the man to the car, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Is she all right?" Ethan asked, worry creeping into his voice. "You will hear everything from her," the man said simply. The back door opened, and for a second, Ethan forgot how to breathe. Aurora sat inside, wrapped in his jacket. It looked far too big on her, but she held it around her like it was armor. Her eyes met his, steadier than last night but still carrying something fragile beneath the surface. "Ethan," she said softly. "Thank you for helping me last night. I did not get the chance to explain anything." Her voice was different now, more composed, carrying confidence she had not shown in the garage. Ethan nodded awkwardly. "You do not have to explain. I am just glad you are all right." She glanced at the lumber yard behind him, the workers, the noise, the worn boots on his feet. Something unreadable crossed her expression. Then she held up the small drawing she had found in the jacket pocket, the one Lily had made. "This," she said quietly, "was the reason I came." Ethan's breath caught. She held it so gently, like it was something priceless. "Your daughter drew this." Yes, he said, suddenly unsure of where this conversation was going. Aurora nodded. Once, her eyes softening. I would like you to come with me. There is something I need to show you. Ethan hesitated. Why me? Aurora did not answer immediately. Instead, she tightened his jacket around herself, as if gathering courage. Because last night, you helped me without asking who I was. Today, I want to return that kindness. And I want to be honest with you. Please, Ethan. Come with me. The way she said it, quiet, sincere, left him with no space to refuse. He exhaled slowly, unaware that his life was stepping onto a completely different track, one that would reveal who Aurora truly was, and just how far her world was from his. The ride from the construction site to downtown felt unreal to Ethan, as if he had stepped out of his own life and into someone else's. The black sedan glided through traffic with a smoothness his old Ford could never dream of, and each mile only deepened the question pounding in his chest, who exactly was Aurora? She sat across from him in the back seat, still wrapped in his jacket, her fingers lightly gripping the fabric near her collar. She seemed calmer than the night before, but there was a quiet tension in her posture, a kind of bracing, as if she were preparing herself for something she had run from for too long. Neither of them spoke until the car turned down a street lined with towering glass buildings. Ethan watched the city rise around them, sunlight bouncing off mirrored surfaces, making everything look sharp and powerful. The sedan slowed before a massive building with steel letters mounted across the front, Vale Global Foundation. Ethan blinked. The name meant something to him. He had seen it printed on billboards advertising scholarship programs, emergency relief funds, and children's hospitals. It was the kind of organization that lived far above his world. The driver stepped out and opened the door for Aurora. She stood, adjusting Ethan's jacket around her shoulders, and then she turned back to him. Come with me, she said softly. Ethan followed because something in her voice asked not for compliance, but for trust. Inside, the lobby was impossibly quiet for such a large place, almost like a museum. Marble floors stretched from wall to wall, and tall windows let in beams of bright winter light. People in pressed suits moved with purpose. But when they saw Aurora, they paused as if unsure whether to approach or bow. Ethan noticed it immediately. They recognized her. She walked ahead, and he kept pace beside her, feeling wildly out of place in his dusty boots and construction jeans. She pushed open the door to a private conference room. Sunlight spilled across a long table, polished to a mirror shine. Ethan stopped just inside the doorway. Aurora stood at the far end of the table and slowly slipped off his jacket, folding it carefully before placing it on the glass. Then she met his eyes. Ethan, she began, her voice steady, there are things about me that I should have told you last night. But I was not exactly myself then. He nodded, waiting. She took a breath. My full name is Aurora Vale. Ethan frowned slightly, thinking. Aurora Vale. Vale, and then it clicked. Like the foundation, he murmured. Not like the foundation, she corrected softly. I am the one running it. The word settled heavy in the air, not dramatic, not proud, just honest. Ethan did not speak for several seconds. The woman he had helped in a freezing parking garage, the woman whose arm had been trapped, whose voice had trembled when she whispered, please, just do it fast, was the head of one of the most powerful philanthropic organizations in the country. Aurora watched him carefully. I did not expect you to find me like that last night. I had been dealing with a very difficult meeting. I left the building through the garage to avoid the press. I was shaking too much to think straight, and when the gate malfunctioned, her voice trailed off. She looked down, as if the memory tasted bitter. Ethan finally stepped further into the room. You do not owe me an explanation, Aurora. Anyone can have a rough moment. She lifted her gaze, and for the first time, there was something like relief in her eyes. Most people do not give coats to strangers in garages. Or help without asking what they get in return. She reached for the drawing she had brought, Lily's drawing, the one that had traveled from Ethan's pocket to her heart overnight. She held it like it carried weight. This, she said, reminded me of something I forgot a long time ago. That warmth still exists. That people can still be good without a reason. Ethan swallowed, unsure how to respond. Aurora took a step closer. That is why I brought you here. I want to help you. Not because of charity. Not because of pity. But because last night you treated me like a person, not a name on a building. She hesitated. And I want to return that humanity to you. Ethan exhaled slowly. What exactly are you offering? Aurora held his jacket against her chest, the fabric softening her tone. A chance. A real one. But before I explain more, there is someone I want you to meet. She gestured toward a hallway lined with windows that overlooked the entire city, and Ethan felt the air shift, as if whatever waited there would pull him deeper into a world he had never imagined stepping into. The hallway Aurora led Ethan through was lined with floor-to-ceiling windows that washed everything in soft winter light, making the city below look distant and unreal. Ethan walked a step behind her, unsure why his pulse kept hammering, unsure why he felt like every part of his life had quietly shifted without his permission. Aurora stopped before a glass door with a silver plaque that read Research and Program Development. She pushed it open, and the room inside looked nothing like the polished boardroom they had just left. Papers were spread across large tables, maps pinned to walls, whiteboards filled with notes and sketches. A few analysts looked up, startled, then quickly straightened when they saw Aurora. She gave them a subtle nod, and they all disappeared into the adjacent room, leaving the space silent except for the distant hum of city traffic. Aurora walked to one of the tables and picked up a folder. She held it without opening it, as if deciding how much truth to reveal. Ethan, she said quietly, my foundation has been searching for someone with a specific set of qualities. Someone who understands struggle, dignity, and the reality of life at the ground level. Someone who can help us design programs that actually work for real people. Not someone with a degree. Not someone from an elite background. Someone human. She turned toward him, her eyes steady. When you helped me last night, you did not know who I was. You did not try to impress me or gain anything. You simply saw a person. In pain and acted. She stepped closer. And that matters to me more than you think. Ethan shifted his weight uncomfortably. Aurora? I work construction. I fix broken railings and carry lumber. I am not sure how that translates into helping run a foundation. Aurora opened the folder and slid a page toward him. It was a printed report with bullet points highlighting problems in low-income housing. Read the notes at the bottom, she said. Ethan did, slowly. Each note felt like someone had followed him around the past few years, recording the exact challenges he and Lily had faced, the rising rent, the impossible wait lists for assistance, the lack of safe public spaces. At the very bottom, written in a different hand, was a single line, what if we asked the people who actually live this? Ethan looked up at her. You wrote that? Aurora nodded. Because I was raised in a world where decisions were made in rooms like this by people who never had to choose between rent and groceries, people who never had to decide whether to heat their apartment or buy medicine. I inherited this position when my father stepped down, but that does not mean I inherited the understanding to fix what is broken. She swallowed, her voice softening. Last night, when I saw that drawing your daughter made, something inside me shifted. I remembered what it felt like to be young and scared and hoping someone would just tell you that the world was not as cold as you feared. Ethan opened his mouth, then closed it again. Aurora continued before he could speak. I want to offer you a position here. Not a token role. A real job. One where your voice influences how we help families like yours. I want you to be part of a new program we are building, something I have been trying to design for months but could not complete because I was missing the one thing I cannot fabricate. Ethan frowned. What is that? Lived experience, she said simply. You have it. You understand it. I do not. She took a breath, almost nervous. If you accept, you would receive training, a steady salary, health benefits, housing support, and childcare assistance. But more importantly, you would have the chance to change lives. Not just your own. Ethan stared at her, the weight of the offer pressing into his chest. He had spent years working himself raw just to barely keep his head above water. And suddenly here she was, handing him a lifeline that felt almost unreal. He finally said, "Aurora? I am honored. Truly. But I do not know if I am the right person for what you are describing." Aurora stepped closer until there was barely a foot between them. "Ethan, there is something you need to understand. Last night you gave me your jacket without hesitation. You freed my hand without fearing the pain it would cause me. You treated me with kindness when I was at my weakest. That is the type of person I need here. And that is the type of person this world needs far more of." She paused, searching his face. "Let me show you one more thing before you decide." She picked up another folder, this one thinner, and handed it to him. When he opened it, he saw a series of photographs taped neatly inside, children eating warm meals, families receiving clothing, volunteers handing out supplies in neighborhoods just like his own. In the corner of one picture, a little girl held a sign that said, "Thank you for seeing us." Ethan felt something lodge in his throat. Aurora watched him silently, letting him absorb it. "The program is ready," she said. "All it needs now is someone who understands what it means to feel invisible and still choose kindness." Ethan closed the folder slowly. He was still unsure. Still overwhelmed. But something inside him, something buried deep under years of exhaustion and disappointment, flickered awake. A sense of possibility. Aurora held out his jacket, placing it gently in his hands. "Take your time," she whispered. "But whatever you choose, know this, you are not invisible to me." And for the first time in a very long time, Ethan believed it. For the rest of the afternoon, Ethan's mind would not settle. Aurora had given him space to think, leaving him alone in the quiet program room with the folders and the photographs. He walked slowly around the table, his fingertips brushing the pages as if they held something fragile. The idea of accepting such an offer felt impossible, unreal, like a dream that did not belong to a man who lived paycheck to paycheck. When the sun began lowering, painting the tall windows gold, Aurora returned. She paused in the doorway, watching him with a softness that did not match the powerful reputation she carried outside these walls. "Ethan," she said gently, "I am taking you somewhere. It will not pressure you, it will simply give you clarity." He did not argue. Something about her presence made resisting feel unnecessary. They rode the elevator down and stepped out into the cold air, where a second car waited. This time, it was not a sedan but a modest SUV. Aurora slid into the passenger seat, Ethan climbed into the back. They drove away from downtown, past neighborhoods Ethan knew too well, until the SUV turned down a narrow street lined with small community buildings. Finally, it pulled up to a renovated warehouse with a bright, hand-painted sign, Harbor House Community Center. Children's laughter echoed faintly from inside. Ethan blinked. "Why are we here?" Aurora stepped out, motioning for him to follow. "Because you are not the only one who has lived the life you are trying so hard to rise above," she explained. "And I want you to see what is possible when someone with your heart steps into a position that allows real change." They walked through the doors into a wide open space filled with long tables and shelves of supplies. Volunteers sorted donations, parents picked up groceries and diapers, a circle of kids worked on art projects in the corner. The warmth in the room felt almost physical, like hope had a temperature. A woman with braided hair approached Aurora. "Miss Vale. I did not expect you today." "I know, Marcy," Aurora said, smiling softly. "This visit is personal." Marcy turned to Ethan, giving him a friendly nod. "You must be the man she has been talking about since this morning." Ethan stiffened in surprise. Aurora shot Marcy a warning look, but the woman only laughed and patted Ethan on the shoulder. "Relax. Around here we love people who help, not people who pretend." Ethan looked around slowly. He noticed a family receiving warm coats. He noticed a teenage boy packing canned food into a cart for an elderly man. He noticed a small girl drawing a picture next to a basket of markers. She reminded him of Lily. His chest tightened. Marcy followed his gaze. This place exists because someone believed every struggling parent deserves dignity. Aurora keeps the lights on. But the heart of this place comes from people like you. Ethan swallowed, unsure how to respond. Aurora approached him quietly. "Ethan, come here," she said, guiding him toward a bulletin board covered in photographs of families who had received help. One photo stopped him cold. A young mother held her child, both wrapped in coats that looked new. Under the photo was a handwritten note, "Thank you for giving us warmth." Aurora spoke softly beside him. "Imagine how many more families we could help if someone with your experience guided our programs. You know where the gaps are. You know where the system fails. You have lived everything we are trying to repair." Ethan stared at the picture of the mother and child until his vision blurred. He thought of Lily sleeping in his arms when she was younger, thought of the nights he had gone hungry just to keep her fed, thought of every time he had felt unseen. Then he looked at Aurora. She was watching him with a quiet, unprotected sincerity, the same look she had the moment he rescued her in the freezing garage. "Aurora," he said slowly, "why do you trust me this much? You barely know me." She held his jacket closer around herself, as if the fabric meant more than warmth. "Because last night, when I was trapped and scared and ashamed of my own panic, you did not see a billionaire or a failure. You saw a human being. And that is the kind of person I want beside me. Not someone polished. Not someone perfect. Someone real." Ethan's breath hitched. Before he could speak, a volunteer called out to Aurora for a quick question. She excused herself, leaving him standing in the hum of the bustling community center. He watched her move through the room, effortlessly comforting, advising, listening. She was powerful, but not untouchable. She was wealthy, but not detached. She was strong, but not unbreakable. And for the first time, he began to understand something unmistakable. Aurora had not brought him here to impress him. She had brought him here because she needed him. Not his skill. Not his loyalty. She needed his humanity. Ethan inhaled deeply as that realization settled. And somewhere inside him, the fear that had held him back for so long began to loosen its grip. As the evening settled over Harbor House, volunteers began packing up supplies, parents gathered their children, and the warm hum inside the community center slowly softened. Ethan stood near a table stacked with winter coats, watching Aurora finish a conversation with Marcy. Something in him felt unsteady, as if the ground beneath his life had shifted into unfamiliar territory. When Aurora finally walked back toward him, the last traces of sunlight painted her hair a soft gold. She stopped just a few feet away, searching his face carefully, almost cautiously, as if afraid of what she might find there. "Ethan," she said gently, "I want to show you one last place before we head back." He nodded without asking where they were going. It felt natural now to follow her, not because of who she was, but because of the sincerity threaded through everything she had shown him today. They left the center and walked around the corner to a smaller building attached to the main warehouse. Aurora unlocked the door with a keycard, then stepped aside so he could enter first. Inside, the space looked nothing like an office or supply room. Instead, it resembled a quiet sanctuary. The lighting was soft, the walls lined with shelves of children's books, crayons, blankets, and bins of small toys. In the far corner stood a rocking chair and a low bookshelf filled with carefully arranged picture frames. The room smelled faintly of lavender and warm paper. Ethan's voice dropped to a whisper. "What is this place?" Aurora stepped beside him, her expression tender in a way he had not seen before. "This," she said softly, "is the family reflection room. It is where we bring children who have been through trauma, or parents who need a safe space to breathe. Sometimes we just sit with them. Sometimes we let them talk. Sometimes they cry. Sometimes they say nothing at all." She brushed her hand lightly across the back of the rocking chair. "This room exists for moments when the world becomes too heavy." Ethan felt a tightness rise in his chest. It is beautiful, he murmured. Aurora nodded, but her eyes glimmered with something deeper than pride. My mother used to bring me to places like this when I was young, she said quietly. Long before my father built an empire, she volunteered at shelters and community centers. She believed that kindness was not a task, it was a responsibility. She paused, her voice tightening. After she passed, my father shut down everything that reminded him of her kindness. He said the world was too cruel for softness. He said feelings were weaknesses. So I grew up learning to hide mine. She swallowed, gripping his jacket around her shoulders. Then last night happened. I told myself I was fine. I told myself I could handle everything alone. But when my arm got stuck, when my breath vanished, when I whispered those words, she hesitated, her voice trembling. I was not whispering to the gate. I was whispering to my life. Please, just do it fast. I was asking for the pain to pass quickly, because I did not think I was allowed to need anyone. Ethan felt his breath catch. Aurora rarely let her guard fall, even now. He could see her fighting it, see the way her fingers curled tighter into the jacket sleeves. Aurora, he said softly, you are allowed to need help. Everyone is. She looked at him then, really looked. Her walls did not crumble, they dissolved, quietly, like frost melting under warm hands. Last night, when you helped me, she whispered, you saw me. Not the billionaire. Not the foundation director. Just me. She blinked back the sting in her eyes. I did not realize how much I needed that. Ethan took a careful step closer, not wanting to overwhelm her. Maybe we both needed something last night, he said. Maybe we crossed paths because neither of us was meant to keep surviving alone. Aurora let out a slow, unsteady breath, as if the words hit a place she had locked away for years. She turned toward the wall of picture frames. One photo showed her mother kneeling beside a child holding a red balloon. Aurora's hand lifted slightly, hovering over the glass. I miss her every day, she whispered. And I have spent years pretending that I do not. Ethan gently placed his hand on the edge of the shelf, close to hers but not touching. You do not have to pretend anymore. For a long moment, they stood in the quiet warmth of the room, surrounded by soft colors and memories of people who had chosen kindness even in their darkest moments. Aurora finally looked up at him, her expression unguarded, her voice barely above a murmur. Ethan, please do not go. Back to disappearing into the background of your own life. Let me help you step forward. Ethan felt something inside him shift, settling into place with a clarity he had not expected. I am not sure where this path leads, he admitted, but I think I am ready to stop walking it alone. Aurora's eyes softened, the smallest smile tugging at her lips. Then you have already taken the first step. And in that warm, quiet room, surrounded by echoes of healing, both of them felt something unfamiliar and deeply needed, the beginning of trust. The drive back toward the city was quiet at first, not tense, but thoughtful, as if both Ethan and Aurora were carrying the weight of everything they had shared inside that small sanctuary room. Streetlights flickered across the windshield, casting soft shadows over Aurora's face, and every now and then she touched the edge of his jacket still wrapped around her, like it grounded her in a way she had not expected. When they reached the foundation building again, the driver dropped them at the private entrance. Aurora led Ethan toward the elevator, but before they stepped inside, her phone buzzed sharply. She glanced at the screen, and all the warmth drained from her expression. For the first time since he had met her, she looked almost frightened. Aurora? Ethan asked quietly. She did not answer. She just turned the phone so he could see the headline glowing on the display. His stomach dropped. It read, Unknown construction worker seen leaving parking garage with Aurora Vale during emotional breakdown. Who is he? Underneath the title was a grainy photo taken from across the garage, showing Ethan holding his jacket out to her while she leaned against the pillar, vulnerable and shaken. Ethan's breath caught. This is not real, he murmured. I know, Aurora said quickly, her voice trembling. You did nothing wrong. But the media has been circling for months, waiting for any weakness they can weaponize. Ethan swallowed hard. Weaponize against who? Against me, she whispered. Against the foundation. Against everything my mother built. She closed her eyes for a second, overwhelmed. When she opened them, the calm, composed version of Aurora was slipping away, replaced by someone fighting panic beneath the surface. We need to get upstairs, she said, her voice tight. Now. They stepped into the elevator. The doors closed, and as it began to rise, her breathing grew shallow. Ethan noticed. Aurora, look at me, he said softly. You are safe. She tried to nod but her throat worked too tightly. I should have anticipated this, she whispered. I should have known they would twist something. They always twist something. Ethan stepped closer, not touching her, but close enough for her to feel grounded. You did nothing wrong, he repeated. And I did nothing wrong. The truth is simple. I helped you. That is all. She finally looked up at him, her eyes shimmering with fear, frustration, and something far more fragile. Simple truth is not enough for people who want to see me fail. The elevator doors opened onto her private floor. A few members of her staff stood waiting with anxious expressions. One of them, a tall man in a suit, immediately stepped forward. Miss Vale, the board is demanding an immediate statement. Some of them think you compromised the foundation by engaging with a stranger in a parking garage. Aurora's jaw tightened. I do not engage with strangers. I was trapped. He helped me. End of story. The man hesitated. Yes, but the photo makes it look like, I do not care what it looks like, Aurora snapped, sharper than Ethan had ever heard her. Then she took a breath, steadying herself. Prepare a room. I will address the board. The staff rushed off. Aurora leaned a hand against the wall for support, her voice barely a murmur. This is exactly what I feared, Ethan. Any moment of weakness becomes ammunition. Any act of humanity becomes controversy. Ethan stepped to her side. Then let me say something, he said. Let me take responsibility. I can tell them I saw you struggling. I can explain what happened. She shook her head desperately. No. Absolutely not. They will tear you apart. They will say you planned this to get money or attention. You do not understand what people become when they smell scandal. Ethan clenched his fists. I am not letting you stand alone in this. For a moment, her composure cracked entirely. I am afraid of what they will do to you, she whispered. And to Lily. And to your life. You do not deserve any of this. Before he could answer, her assistant returned. Miss Vale, the board is ready for you. Aurora straightened, gathering herself like armor. She turned to Ethan. Please wait here. I will handle this. Ethan shook his head. Aurora, please, she said again, her voice softer now, breaking in the middle. If they see you, it will only get worse. He hesitated, torn between protecting her and respecting what she needed. Finally, he nodded. She began to walk away, but halfway to the boardroom doors, she stopped. Slowly, she turned back toward him, her voice trembling as she said, Ethan, please do not disappear. Not now. The doors closed behind her. And Ethan, standing alone in the quiet hallway, felt dread settle heavy in his chest. He knew this was more than a scandal. It was the storm she had been bracing for her entire life. And it was coming straight for both of them. The hallway outside the boardroom felt colder than the parking garage where Ethan and Aurora had first crossed paths. Ethan paced the narrow strip of carpet, his hands gripping the back of his own neck as muffled voices rose on the other side of the thick double doors. He could not make out the exact words, but the tone was unmistakable, sharp, accusatory, impatient. At one point, he heard someone raise their voice, followed by a tense silence that made his stomach knot. He kept replaying the headline in his mind, the grainy photo of Aurora leaning against the concrete pillar while he wrapped his jacket around her shoulders. To him, the image was nothing more than a moment of kindness. To the world, it was something they could twist into a spectacle. When the doors finally swung open, Aurora stepped out, shoulders drawn tight, her eyes rimmed with exhaustion. Her assistant followed, looking equally strained. The boardroom behind them buzzed with frantic whispers. Ethan took a step forward. "Aurora, what happened?" She opened her mouth, then closed it, pressing her fingers to her temple. "They want a public statement by morning," she said, her voice barely steady. "They want me to explain everything, to justify why I was in that garage, why I was with you, why I looked," her breath hitched. "Weak." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Weak? Aurora, you were trapped. Injured. Freezing. The truth does not matter," she whispered. "Optics do." A board member stepped forward, an older man with silver hair and a stiff posture. "Miss Vale," he said curtly, "we will need to finalize the press briefing tonight." And as for the man involved, he looked at Ethan with thinly veiled disdain. He should sign a non-disclosure agreement immediately. Aurora stiffened. "He will not sign anything." "Miss Vale, he helped me," she said sharply. "He did not exploit me. He did not leak anything. He did not even know my name." The man did not back down. "Nevertheless, the Foundation cannot risk its public image." Ethan stepped forward before Aurora could speak. "Sir, with all due respect, I have no intention of hurting your Foundation or Aurora. I did not ask for any of this." The board member scoffed. "People like you always say that until they see an opportunity." Ethan's heartbeat thundered in his ears. "People like you." He knew exactly what that meant. Aurora's voice cut through the air like glass. "You do not speak to him that way." The entire hallway went still. The board member stared at her, stunned that she would defend Ethan so fiercely. But Aurora did not flinch. "My mother built this foundation on dignity," she said, her voice shaking but strong. "And I refuse to let you tear that apart because of your prejudice." The man drew in a sharp breath. "Then we will reconvene in an hour to finalize the statement." He turned and disappeared back into the boardroom. When he was gone, Aurora's strength wavered, and she leaned back against the wall. Ethan moved toward her instinctively. "Aurora, you should not have to defend me like that." "I am not defending you," she whispered. "I am defending what is right." She slid down the wall until she sat on the floor, her knees drawn up. Ethan crouched beside her. "Talk to me," he said gently. She shook her head, pressing her palms to her eyes. "I have spent years trying to prove that I am strong. That I can lead without breaking. That I can hold this entire foundation together the way my father expects. And the moment the world sees me vulnerable, they act like it is the end of the world." She dropped her hands, her eyes glassy. "Do you know what one board member said in there? He said I made myself look emotionally unstable because I let a stranger help me." Ethan felt something hot flare in his chest. That is not instability. That is humanity. Aurora stared at him, her breath unsteady. "I have built my life around the belief that showing emotion makes me unfit to lead. That if I let someone see me scared, it would mean I am failing." She swallowed hard. "But last night, when you helped me, I was not failing. I was just human." Ethan sat beside her on the floor, their shoulders almost touching. "Aurora, you do not have to prove anything. Not to them. And not to me." For a long moment, she said nothing. The hallway hummed with the soft sound of ventilation, the distant murmur of staff rushing to contain the growing scandal. Finally, Aurora turned her head toward him, her voice barely a whisper. "Ethan, I am terrified that trusting you will cost me everything." His heart cracked a little at that. Not because she doubted him, but because she had clearly lived her entire life surrounded by people she could not trust. He spoke quietly. "I cannot promise the world will be kind. I cannot promise the board will stop twisting things. But I can promise you this, I am not walking away." Her eye softened, something inside her melting at the edges. "I believe you," she whispered. "And that scares me more than anything." Before either of them could say more, her assistant rushed back. "Miss Vale, they are ready for you." Aurora inhaled deeply, steadying herself. She stood slowly, and Ethan rose with her. Before walking away, she touched his hand, just briefly, the contact light but trembling. "Come back after this," she murmured. "Please." He nodded. She disappeared into the boardroom again, leaving Ethan alone with a single, undeniable truth settling heavy and certain in his chest: this was no longer just a scandal. It was the moment Aurora's walls finally cracked wide open. And he knew exactly who had slipped inside. The second time the boardroom doors opened, the shouting had stopped. The building had fallen into a hush so deep that Ethan felt it pulse in his chest. Aurora stepped out slowly, her posture straight, her chin lifted, but her hands trembling at her sides as if she had poured every last ounce of strength into whatever had happened inside that room. Her eyes searched for him immediately. When she found him, something fragile in her expression let go, and she exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. He walked toward her. "Aurora?" She shook her head once, not in dismissal, but in disbelief, as though trying to steady the emotion she had kept locked down for years. "It is done," she whispered. "I told them the truth. All of it." Ethan felt his pulse quicken. "And what did they say?" Aurora looked upward, gathering breath. "They were furious at first. They wanted to control the narrative, twist the story, bury anything that made me look vulnerable." She paused. "But I reminded them that this foundation was built by a woman who believed vulnerability was strength. I reminded them of my mother." Ethan's breath caught at the quiet fire in her voice. Aurora continued, softer now. "I told them I would not hide what happened in that garage. I told them I was trapped, scared, and you helped me. And if anyone wanted to shame me for accepting kindness, they could find a new director." Ethan stared at her, stunned. "You said that?" "Yes," she said, her eyes glistening. "And then, something unexpected happened. A few board members stood up for me. They said the public should know the truth, not a fabricated scandal." She swallowed. A truth about a woman who had a human moment. And a man who stepped in when no one else did. Ethan felt warmth spread through his chest, slow and steady. Aurora glanced down the hallway, then back at him with a small, trembling smile. "They agreed to let me give the statement my way." She gestured for him to follow. "Come with me. Please." They walked to a small studio room on the same floor. The cameras were off. The lights dim. Only one technician waited inside, quietly adjusting the microphone. Aurora approached him. "Give us a moment," she said kindly. The technician nodded and stepped outside. Ethan and Aurora stood alone in the soft glow of the studio lights. She picked up the prepared notes on the table, read the first few lines, and then set them down with a quiet determination. "I am not reading any of that," she said. "It does not reflect what actually happened." She turned to Ethan. "I want you to stand with me while I record this." Ethan blinked, caught off guard. "Aurora, are you sure?" "Yes," she whispered. "Because I am done hiding." The camera light flicked on. Aurora faced it. With steady eyes, her voice gentle but unwavering. "Yesterday evening, I experienced a frightening moment in the parking garage of my foundation. My arm was trapped in a malfunctioning gate, and I was alone, afraid, and unable to free myself. A man named Ethan Cole, who happened to be passing by, helped me without hesitation. He wrapped his coat around me to keep me warm. He made sure I was safe. And he did all of this without knowing who I was." She paused, her voice dipping with emotion. "The photo circulating online shows a vulnerable moment, but it is not a scandal. It is an act of human kindness. And I refuse to let kindness be twisted into something shameful." Ethan listened, his chest tightening with something he could not name. Aurora continued. The world is quick to judge what it does not understand. But Ethan's actions were decent, compassionate, and deeply appreciated. So let me be perfectly clear, he did nothing wrong. She looked toward him then, for just a moment, letting the truth settle between them. And I am grateful he was there. The technician stepped back into the room, quietly signaling that the recording was finished. Aurora turned off the microphone, her shoulders dropping with relief. It is done, she said softly. Ethan stepped closer. You were incredible. She gave him a tired smile, one that carried pieces of strength and exhaustion all woven together. I was honest, she whispered. For the first time in a very long time. They walked out together into the crisp night air. The building lights reflected off the pavement, shimmering like scattered stars. Aurora hesitated, then gently slipped her hand into his. Not bold. Not dramatic. Just real. Ethan, she murmured, no matter what storm comes next, thank you for being the one person who saw me, not the billionaire, not the director, just me. He squeezed her hand lightly. You never had to earn that. Aurora let out a breath that trembled into a quiet laugh. Then promise me something, she said. Do not let me face what comes next alone. Ethan looked at her with a certainty he had never felt before. You will not, he said. Not ever again. And under the soft glow of the foundation lights, with the city breathing quietly around them, the woman who had spent her life hidden behind walls and the man who lived his life unseen finally stood side by side, their worlds no longer divided by status or fear, but connected by something far stronger, the choice to walk forward together.